He held up my divorce papers during a team meeting and said, "Looks like Daniel just got downsized at home too." Everyone laughed, even my intern. I didn't say anything. I just sat there. Hands folded, breath steady, eyes locked on the screen like I was still listening to the budget forecast. Inside, something snapped. Not loudly, not with fire, more like glass cracking under pressure. My name is Daniel. I'm 44 years old. I've spent the last 7 years helping build a startup from a dusty garage to a floor-to-ceiling window office downtown. I was the head of product, but more than that, I was the quiet one. The one who stayed late, didn't take credit, didn't complain when others took it instead. I don't yell, I don't argue, I don't make scenes. So when Gary, my co-founder, my friend, walked into that Friday meeting holding my divorce papers like a party prop, I didn't react. He read out the court filing number like it was part of a PowerPoint presentation. "Guess Daniel couldn't keep a wife either," he joked, and they laughed. Not all of them. Some just glanced at each other, some looked down, but no one said a word. Not even Maya, who used to defend me when Gary cut me off in meetings. Not even Thomas, who I trained from scratch. I wasn't surprised by Gary. Not really. He'd been inching closer to that line for years. But it was the silence that got me. The stillness in that room. The kind that doesn't happen when people are unsure. It happens when they've already picked a side. I didn't stand up. I didn't shout. I just let the laughter pass through me like smoke. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. I knew I'd never be the same man again. 5 years ago, it was just the two of us, Gary and me, crammed into his mom's garage with 2 laptops, a whiteboard, and too much caffeine. No funding, no company perks. Just an idea and a stubborn belief that we could make something real. Gary was the mouth. I was the hands. He pitched. I built. He networked. I coded. I didn't mind the dynamic. Not at first. We were friends, college roommates. We'd pulled all-nighters for finals and drank cheap beer after hackathons. I trusted him like a brother. Back then, Lauren used to stay up with me. She'd bring tea around midnight, sometimes sit next to me on the floor while I debugged code. We'd joke about the future, how the company would make enough to get Emily into any school she wanted. Those were soft nights. I remember her wearing my hoodie, tracing her finger along my arm as I typed. We'd fall asleep on the couch, the 3 of us, me, Lauren, and my laptop. When we landed our first angel investor, it felt like flying. We moved from the garage to a small rented space above a bakery. I remember bringing Lauren flowers that day. Emily was barely 3, babbling words that almost sounded like sentences. I thought I was building something for all of us. But building comes at a cost. The hours stretched, deadlines piled up. Suddenly I was missing dinners, then birthdays, then anniversaries. Lauren never yelled. That was the worst part. She just started folding in on herself. She'd leave notes, gentle reminders, half pleas. "Emily asked where you were. I saved you some dinner. We miss you." And I'd promise. "Just 2 more weeks, love. Then I'll breathe." I meant it every time, but the weeks kept resetting. 2 more weeks became 2 more years. At the office, things got louder. We grew to 20 people, then 40. We moved downtown. Gary became the face of the company. Podcasts, panels, investor meetings. I stayed behind the scenes, handling infrastructure, writing code, cleaning up bugs no one else noticed. He always introduced me as the brains. But it started sounding more like a footnote. I started hearing phrases like Gary's platform and Gary's team in press mentions. The spotlight wasn't just on him. It was burning me out. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Let him take the glory. I didn't need applause. I needed the company to survive, for all of us. There were small wins. Lauren got a new job, teaching part-time. Emily won a drawing contest at school and drew a stick figure family, me with a laptop, her with a giant pink sun, Lauren with flowers in her hands. I hung it on my office wall. It stayed there until everything started falling apart. By the third year, the warmth at home had turned into careful politeness. Conversations were more like scheduling meetings. Can you pick Emily up Friday? We need to talk about the mortgage. No kisses goodbye. No lingering hugs. Sometimes I'd find Lauren awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. I didn't ask what she was thinking. I already knew. I told myself it was temporary, that I just had to finish this one big release, secure this one last funding round. Then I'd be present again. Then I'd be a husband, a father. But deep down, I was starting to suspect I'd already missed the moment when that could have made a difference. One night I got home late, later than usual. Lauren was asleep on the couch, an empty wine glass on the table. Her phone was unlocked beside her. I saw a text preview. You deserve more than waiting around. I didn't open it. I just stood there, in the dark, watching her breathe. Told myself I trusted her, that she was just venting to a friend, that if I started asking questions I'd break something that was already paper thin. At work, Gary started showing up in designer suits, talking like a man who had forgotten where he came from. He'd cut me off in meetings, twist the story of how we built this place. His charm made it easy to believe him. People wanted to believe him. I kept my head down, told myself to focus. Told myself that being quiet was the same as being strong. It wasn't. But by the time I realized that, I'd already sacrificed the things that made me whole and given them to people who were quietly emptying me out. It started small, the way most fractures do. A glance, a pause, a word left out. Gary began answering questions I was supposed to handle. At first I thought he was just helping. I'd speak up in a meeting, and he'd finish my sentence, or worse, redirect it. What Daniel's trying to say is, he'd begin, and suddenly I wasn't in the room anymore. Then came the investor calls. The calendar invites stopped including me. I'd see meetings pop up and disappear without my name attached. I asked Gary once casually if I should be on those calls. He laughed. It's mostly fluff, man. You hate small talk anyway. He wasn't wrong. But that wasn't the point. At home, the silence had turned into avoidance. Lauren started staying out late. She took Emily on weekend trips to her parents' place, gone without asking. She said she needed space to breathe. I didn't argue. I nodded, like always. A new analyst joined the team around this time. Maya. Fresh out of grad school, sharp eyes, sharper instincts. She was thoughtful in meetings, never loud. I liked that about her. She reminded me of how I used to be before the noise. One evening, while waiting for the elevator, she turned to me and said, "Did you know Gary pitched the software to an accelerator as his own project?" I blinked. She shrugged. I figured it was a misunderstanding, but he didn't mention you once. I forced a smile. He's the pitch guy. She looked at me for a beat. You built the whole back end, right? Yeah, I admitted, a little too quietly. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't have to. I saw it in her eyes. The same unease that had been growing in mine. A week later, I found 2 hotel charges on our joint credit card. Same day, different cities. Lauren said it was a solo retreat, part of a healing workshop she'd been meaning to try. I nodded again. Of course. Who was I to question healing? Gary hired 2 new consultants, old college friends of his, loud, flashy guys who brought more buzz than value. One of them, Derek, sat in on a board meeting and introduced me as the back-end guy who makes the wires go bleep. Everyone laughed. Except me. I stopped hanging my daughter's drawings in my office. The walls felt different. Even the coffee tasted colder. The people I had trained now deferred to Gary. Some of them started mirroring his tone, his language. I'd suggest something, in a meeting, and they'd wait to see how Gary responded before agreeing. Once I recommended a rollout delay to fix some back-end issues, and Gary waved it off. We'll patch it post-launch. Speed matters more. That product failed, quietly, internally. No one mentioned it again. I started coming home later, staying in my car before going inside. I'd scroll through old pictures of Emily, of me and Lauren smiling at some cabin years ago. The light in, our eyes looked like it belonged to strangers. One night I found myself staring at a blank email draft addressed to Gary. I wanted to ask directly what was going on, why he was shutting me out, why the company felt like it was slipping through my fingers while I was still typing code to keep it alive, but I never sent it. I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I was tired, overworked, that maybe this was just what growth felt like, chaotic, unbalanced, messy. It was easier to think that than to believe the people closest to me were quietly walking away. Maya kept checking in, nothing dramatic. Just small, sharp questions. Did you approve the new funding outline? Why is your name missing from the press kit? Have you seen the updated cap table? I hadn't. I was missing pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was supposed to be solving. Then came the board dinner. I wasn't invited. I found out from a junior dev who asked me how the steak was. I laughed it off, said I had other plans. But when I went home that night, something shifted. I stood in the kitchen for an hour, staring at the blinking clock on the microwave, listening to the empty house. Lauren was gone for the weekend again. Emily was with her parents. It was just me, and the quiet thud of realization landing in my chest. I was being erased, bit by bit, not with violence, not with cruelty, but with indifference. And somehow, that hurt worse. It was raining the night. Lauren left. Not the dramatic kind, just a quiet drizzle, soft and unbothered, like the world didn't know what was happening inside our house. I got home late. Again. The living room light was on. The house smelled like vanilla candles and something faintly burnt. For a second, I thought she'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for me, but the couch was empty. The kitchen was clean. Too clean. Half the drawers were open. A suitcase was gone. There was a small stack of papers on the dining table, neatly aligned like she was afraid to leave a mess even now. Divorce petition, signed, and a note. Just one line. We've both known this was coming. No anger, no pleading. Just the kind of sentence you write when you've already grieved and moved past it, alone. I sat in the chair for a long time. Didn't read the papers again. Didn't call her. Didn't cry. I just stared at the note until my vision blurred. Emily's room was still untouched, her stuffed animals lined up perfectly along the shelf. I didn't go in. I couldn't. I slept. On the floor that night. No blanket, no thoughts. Just a numb quiet that wrapped around everything. 2 days later, I took the divorce papers to the office, not out of strength, just because I didn't know where else to go. I wasn't ready to tell anyone. I thought maybe I could keep things professional, dignified. I was wrong. It was the weekly team meeting. Gary walked in late, holding coffee in one hand and, somehow, my divorce documents in the other. I don't know how he got them. Maybe they'd passed through HR. Maybe he saw them on my desk. It didn't matter. He walked to the front like it was a stand-up set, held the papers up and said, "Looks like Daniel just got downsized at home too." And the room laughed, some loud, some nervous. A few faces turned away. But no one stopped him. Not Maya. Not the CFO I'd mentored for 3 years. Not even my intern, fresh out of college, who used to ask me about back-end architecture like it was magic. I felt the world tilt. I didn't say a word, didn't move. My heart didn't even race. It just sank. In that moment, I remembered the way Lauren used to hold my hand at night when Emily was still a baby. I remembered the smell of her shampoo, her laugh when I tried to make pancakes and nearly burned the kitchen down. I remembered every quiet, ordinary moment we used to share, and how they'd all been reduced to this. A joke in an open-plan office. Gary made another comment, something about free weekends. I didn't hear it. My ears were ringing. I stood up, slowly, and I walked out. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors. I just left. past through the halls I helped build, past the product posters I designed, past the people I used to call a team. I didn't go home. I drove until the gas light blinked on, ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, slept in the car, ate toast at 3 a.m., watched drunk college kids stumble in and out while I sipped cold coffee. That week was a blur. I didn't check my phone, didn't respond to emails. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want apologies. I wanted silence. And in that silence, something inside me began to shift. Not like rage, not even sadness, more like clarity. A slow, steady unraveling of every excuse I'd made for other people's cruelty. Every time I said it's not that bad. Every time I smiled through being sidelined. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. Justice, not the kind that explodes. The kind that waits, learns, plans. So I went back to that diner each night, ordered the same meal, scribbled in a notebook, lines, dates, names, not to hurt, just to remember, to see clearly. Because clarity, I was starting to understand, is where the power begins. I returned to work the following Monday. No announcements. No dramatic entrance. Just my usual slow walk through the glass doors, coffee in hand, backpack slung over one shoulder. I nodded at the receptionist. She blinked twice, surprised, then gave a forced smile. Gary wasn't in yet. That was fine. I didn't need a scene, I just needed my chair, my computer, my silence. From that day forward, I played a new role. The man they thought they broke. The one too numb to fight. Quiet, routine, reliable. They called it resilience. I let them. But under the surface, I was collecting. First, I made copies of everything. Old architecture diagrams, code commits, Slack archives. Anything that proved what I had built, when I had built it. I found early email chains between Gary and me, some with subject lines like, "Your back-end draft, pure gold." That made me smile. He hadn't always been a villain. But people change, especially when power enters the room. Then I looked into our ownership agreements. We'd never signed a proper co-founder contract, but our first seed round had a clause, one I remembered but had never revisited, stating that the original product IP remained with the creator unless explicitly transferred. It never had been. Gary had assumed control through noise, not law. I reached out to Rhea, an old law school friend who had pivoted to corporate litigation. We hadn't spoken in years. I told her everything, sparing no detail. She didn't flinch, just said, "We'll need leverage, real leverage." So we started building it. She helped me form a shell company under a different name. Through a web of proxies and strategic buys, we began acquiring voting shares from minor stakeholders who wanted out, early employees, disillusioned angels, people who just wanted liquidity. Meanwhile, Maya started helping behind the scenes. She'd seen too much to stay neutral. One day she walked into my office, closed the door, and whispered, "I have access to Gary's expense folder. You'll want to see it." I did. Personal vacations booked on the company card. Luxury dinners, filed as client meetings. One reimbursement labeled therapy support for employee morale, which turned out to be a weekend yacht trip for Gary and Derek. We saved everything. Gary was sloppy with documentation. He relied on charm, not details. But charm doesn't hold up in audit logs. Every day I came in like normal, smiled during stand-ups, took notes in meetings, quietly rewired the back end to log more access metadata, not maliciously, just carefully, documenting every touch point, every pattern. Then came the close call. Maya was digging through archived emails on a shared drive when Gary walked in unannounced. I was in the next office. She messaged me on just one word. "Here." I stepped in immediately, holding a printed dev roadmap, pretending to be asking about the next sprint. Maya slipped away. Gary looked at me suspiciously. "You doing late night?" "Research now," he joked, eyeing the documents. I shrugged. "Just revisiting old threads. We've grown fast. I want to make sure we haven't missed anything." He smirked. "That's why I keep you around. The details guy." I smiled back. After he left, I sat alone for 20 minutes, not because I was scared, but because I realized how close I'd come to losing the plan, and how badly I wanted it to work. There was one night, around 2 a.m., when I sat in my car outside the office and questioned everything. Was this revenge? Was I just bitter? What if I walked away, let it all go? But the truth came back quiet and steady. I wasn't doing this to destroy anyone. I was doing it to reclaim what I'd already built. To stop pretending that being good meant being walked over. The next day, Ria confirmed our shell firm now held just enough shares to trigger a vote. She'd also secured private commitments from 2 early board members who were tired of Gary's reckless spending and unkept promises. It was almost time. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm, clear, like someone who had spent too long underwater and had finally broken the surface. There was no explosion. No speech, just a folder on my desk labeled Closure. Inside it, the proof, the power, and the plan. It was a Thursday, quarterly board meeting. The kind where suits outnumber developers, where coffee is poured into porcelain cups instead of paper ones, and where words like vision and scalability are thrown around like currency. I walked in early. Not nervous, just prepared. Gary arrived late as usual, wearing a slate gray blazer and his signature smirk. He winked at Maya on the way in. She didn't react. The meeting started with his usual theatrics, a flashy slide deck, overly rehearsed, jokes about the roller coaster of startup life, and broad strokes about our roadmap. No substance, no strategy, just noise. Then came the agenda item labeled Foundational Review. That was my cue. I stood up, unfolded a thin black folder and passed copies to each board member. No slides, no speeches. Just the truth. The first page, a timeline of the product, line by line, feature by feature, tied to my original commits, with timestamps and proof of authorship. The second, the clause from our first seed agreement, highlighting the IP retention terms Gary had ignored. The third, financial inconsistencies with receipts, misuse of company funds, personal purchases logged as business expenses, inflated projections and investor decks. Gary chuckled at first. This is a distraction, he said. Old history. Founders share everything in the early days. Daniel's just upset. But as the room grew quiet, his voice lost its bounce. I turned to the last page, a formal notice from Ria, citing our firm's current shareholding status and intent to initiate a leadership vote. Gary stood, flustered now. You can't be serious. One board member, an old angel who'd invested when we still had cereal boxes for desks, cleared his throat. Gary, I've watched you for years, and I've watched him. You forgot who built the bones of this place. The vote wasn't even close. 5 out of 7 voted in favor of the motion. Gary was removed as CEO, effective immediately. He looked at me then, not angry, not even surprised. Just hollow. Like he'd finally realized the foundation he stood on wasn't his. The next day, his name disappeared from the company website. A polite internal memo cited a strategic leadership transition. He tried to contest it, tried calling the investors. But the paper trail was airtight. Ria made sure of that. 3 weeks later, I heard his house, the one he'd leveraged against company credit, had gone into foreclosure. I bought it. Cash. I never moved in. Never even walked through the front door. I just changed the locks and left it empty. I told no one. Not even Maya. It wasn't about the house. It was about the silence. There was no press release. No victory parade. I came to work the next morning, made coffee in the break room and joined the 9 a.m. product sync like it was any other day. People noticed, of course. Whispers passed in the hallways. But no one said anything outright. Maya knocked on my door that afternoon. He's really gone? I nodded. He is. She hesitated. You okay? I'm clear. She gave a small smile, then slid a folder across my desk. Found another copy of the cap table, cleaned and updated. Thank you. She paused at the door. You didn't burn anything down, that's rare. I didn't need fire, I said. I just needed light. The day ended like any other, but everything had changed. The company, my company, was mine again. Not in the loud, chest-thumping way, but in the quiet, rightful way. The way that fits like a coat you once loved and forgot how warm it was. I sat in the break room that evening, long after everyone had left. The hum of the fridge, the distant buzz of the city outside, it all felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just honest. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And when it does, you finally hear yourself again. It's been a year. I'm still here. Behind the same desk, sipping the same coffee, reviewing the same lines of code. I once thought I'd never touch again, only now it's mine. Fully, quietly, undeniably mine. Maya's now head of ops. Ria is still on retainer, though I only hear from her when something needs signing or when she sends over one of her famously dry memes. We laugh more these days. The kind of laughter that doesn't hide pain behind it. Lauren and I, we don't talk much, but we don't argue either. We split custody of Emily in even weeks. She seems happy, at peace. On Fridays, when I drop her off, Lauren sometimes lingers at the door as if she wants to say something but decides against it. I think that's okay. Some things are better left unsaid. I've stopped visiting Gary's old house. For a while, I'd drive by once a week just to remind myself of the silence I'd earned. But last month I parked outside, opened my contacts, and deleted his name. Then his number. Then the address. That was the last string I hadn't cut. And I didn't even realize I was still holding it. These days I take lunch outside. No headphones, just the wind. Sometimes I watch the interns pass by, fresh, excited, full of questions. One of them asked me last week, "What's the biggest thing you've learned in tech?" I smiled and said, that it's never about the code. It's about who you become when things fall apart. Because that's what happened to me. I fell apart. Quietly. Slowly. And then, even more quietly, I came back, not stronger, just clearer. I don't call it revenge. That word feels too sharp. Too angry. What I did wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about remembering who I was before they made me forget. I walk home now, most evenings. No car, no noise. Just footsteps on pavement and the sound of myself, breathing. You don't always have to fight loud. Sometimes survival itself is the loudest answer.